Today we're going to be talking about Crush. Crush is book 2 in the Crave series. I'm not gonna lie, when I first saw Crave, I genuinely believed that it was a Twilight knockoff. But at this point, at the end of book 2, I am fully sold on this series. To the point that I immediately finished book 2 and started book 3. Like, with no pause. I am hooked at this point. If you don't know what Crave is and you just want a little teaser. The main premise of the story is that there's this girl whose parents have died tragically, and then she was shipped off to a boarding school in Alaska. But she finds out that it isn't an ordinary school and that the students are in fact vampires, werewolves, dragons, etc. If you have not read both Crave and Crush, it is your time to exit. I'm gonna go into spoilers. Goodbye, non-spoiler people. So to recap the end of book 1, Leah tried to kill Grace as a human sacrifice in order to bring Hudson back. And Grace accidentally ended up trapping Hudson in her own body, and then she turned to stone. She is in full gargoyle form for 3 months. And when the story picks up, it is when she's come back to her human form. She has no memory of this time that she spent trapped in her own mind pretty much with Hudson. At the moment, he is still trapped in her mind. The main goal of the story is to get him out of her head and kill him. But because he is presently residing inside of Grace's mind, she is having a really hard time really reconnecting with Jaxon. For her, it's only been a day, but for Jaxon, he's been waiting for her to come back for 3 months, and now all of a sudden Grace literally can't kiss him, and we don't know why for the longest time until we realize that it's Hudson stopping her, because he's like, this is just absolutely disgusting. We have some school time stuff, and Grace is trying to catch up on the 3 months that she's lost, but the big event at the school right now is a Ludaris tournament. I consider it a cross between Quidditch and the Triwizard tournament. The prize is a blood diamond, which is going to be one of the ingredients that they need for a spell in order to get Hudson out of Grace's mind. Originally, Grace just doesn't want to play, but she ends up deciding to join because the prize to her at that time is so worth it. While we're sort of preparing for this, we also take a side quest to the Blood Letter, which is sort of Jackson's second mom, but she is known as the most fearsome vampire, other than Jackson's dad, I guess. She says that killing the Unkillable Beast is the solution to their problem of getting Hudson out of her mind. And I was a little confused at this point because I was like, is this heartstone thing that they need from the Unkillable Beast that he's guarding, is this part of the spell, or was this a secondary option? My understanding was it was a secondary option to the rest of the spell, but I feel like I got muddled in there. While we're there, the Blood Letter puts Grace in prison. She has like this barred cage, and she says the reason she's doing it is just in case Hudson takes over her body, which he does at this point. Hudson's in her mind at this point, and she went from just having this weird urge that she can't explain to not kiss Jaxon, and then to the point where she can hear Hudson, and now he fully takes over her body for a little bit, which is really, really bad, because if he does that too many times, then it's going to be impossible for Grace to come back. It's very like The Host. The problem is that Hudson is either as attractive or more attractive than Jaxon. And I was like, I think I've seen this film before. This was feeling very Vampire Diaries to me. And at this point, I am fighting the urge to be Team Hudson because I like him. He's funny. And that's the problem, is his banter with Grace is just, it's so much better than hers and Jackson's. And in comparison, Hudson's like the fun one, which obviously, because at this point we think he's like a psychopath, and he is just like really charming. Like, that's part of it. Everyone's like, oh, he just charms you until he decides that he's gonna go crazy and kill all these people like he did last time. But Grace is having a hard time seeing how he did that. And I was like, you know, after meeting characters throughout the years, I'm like, I don't put anything past anybody. We've met some characters who are so kind to our main characters, and then they will just kill people at the drop of a hat. So I didn't fully discount Hudson the way that Grace was, but I was fighting the flip to his team so hard, like probably harder than I've ever fought against changing positions in a love triangle in my life, because I do like Jaxon. Fun fact, while they were at the Blood Letters, Jaxon got this spell to break the mating bond, because Jaxon and Grace are mates. They have its specific magic between them. And he is considering this because if you break the mating bond, like, that is what Hudson is feeding off of. That's where he's getting his power from. So if they break the mating bond, they're like nothing for him to pull energy from anymore. At this point, Grace doesn't know about him even asking for this spell, and Hudson does feel guilty to an extent for pulling power from them. And he also feels guilty just for being there at all. So like, he obviously thinks his death was not warranted, but at the same time, he's like, I didn't ask Leah to bring me back. And apparently, like, she wasn't even his mate. He has the power of persuasion, like he can say things and people will just do it, which is obviously very dangerous and sometimes hard to control. So at one point, Hudson had made a joke to Leah, like, you're always going to love me. And that was, you know, Ella Enchanted, like just the spell. And then she couldn't let it go when he died because she'd been told that she would love him forever. And so that's why she did what she did. Doesn't excuse what she did. That was literally insane, but at least it makes a little more sense. The blood letter teaches Grace sort of how to put up specific walls in her mind to make it harder for Hudson to take over her body. And then we go back to school where Jackson's parents have arrived. They are creepy as heck, and they want to meet Grace because they've heard obviously that their, you know, remaining son has found his mate, and they found out that she is the first gargoyle in 1,000 years. Guess why there hasn't been a gargoyle in 1,000 years? Because of Jackson's parents. They killed them all. Grace is being stupid about the situation because they're in school assembly. Grace originally is going to go sit in the front row in front of his parents. And Hudson is in her mind like, do not do that. If you think they'll hesitate to kill you in front of a school assembly, like, you are wrong. They will go for the jugular, like, immediately. And so she has to keep hiding all the time, but it's obviously not going to work. Like, his parents aren't going to leave until they meet her. And they make the announcement that they just love Grace so much that they're going to take her in and help her out, which Hudson is like, they're going to chain you up in a dungeon for the rest of your near immortal life. So Hudson tells her, say that you want a challenge for inclusion, and she's like, what is that? He's like, just do it now, you don't have time. And so she challenges for inclusion, which means she wants a seat on the circle with the other representatives of, you know, the vampires, which are Jackson's parents, and then, you know, the leaders of dragons, witches, and werewolves, which means they're going to be having Ludera's Tournament Part 2. In this one, when you challenge for inclusion, the only person who can be on your team is your mate. I mean, luckily, we have Jaxon, but not quite lucky enough. This did not make sense to me. So, the night before, we have to do this Ludera's competition. Oh, before I forget, during the time that Grace was locked in her own mind, we get the impression that she and Hudson had a relationship during this time. Because, I just feel like it was very clear that they were at some point in love, and now Hudson's very hurt because she doesn't remember any of this, and she comes out of it being like, oh yeah, I made it to Jaxon, which I felt bad for Hudson about that, but still, I was during the whole book still wanting, I don't know, the Jaxon-Grace relationship more until like almost the very end of the book. But obviously those memories are somewhere locked in Grace's memories because she is doing this art project because she's behind in every single class that exists. And she is painting and painting. She's like, I don't know what I'm painting. I've never experienced this before where I don't have a specific image in mind, but she's just kind of going for it like she's possessed. And eventually she finally has this image of a place that she's never seen before, and she paints it out. And Hudson really likes it. And she asks him why, and he says it's because it's his lair. So obviously, like, they have spent enough time together that she either visited his lair with him in her mind while they were stuck there for 3 months, or he's described it or shown it to her somehow. But let's move forward because we have decided to make the stupidest of stupid decisions ever. The night before, this Ludera's round 2, which is supposed to be like the hardest trial you could possibly go through, very good chances of getting killed. They decide that because Hudson is feeding off the mating bond, it's taking too much of their energy, and they need to get him out of Grace's mind so that they can go through the Ludera's competition. The reason that this is so stupid is because she's been given, you know, I think it was like 48 hours until her competition from the time of her challenging for inclusion. That is not that much time, and they're worried that they can't do the spell with all the stuff that they need. So they're gonna try to go to the dragon graveyard first because they need those 4 elements, and they can they know that the dragon bone is the one that they really need because they got the bloodstone. They're pretty much ready to do the spell. But we go to the dragon graveyard with Flint and a girl named Enid, another dragon, Macys, Xavier, and obviously Jaxon and Grace / Hudson. And I liked this scene because they have to drop into this like dark hole. This is where all of the dragons are called back to when they die. And so it's not like that you just land, you fall for 30 seconds because dragons can fly, but most of our characters can't. So they have to go through this and catch each other, and it's really funny. Like, I enjoyed this scene of them getting to the dragon graveyard, but most of the dragon bones are so incredibly large that even Jackson's powers are not going to be able to carry them back out of the cave. So they're looking for like the very end of a tailbone or like a toe bone or something like that that they can take with them, and it has to be a whole bone. And for some reason, unbeknownst to me, all of the bones are shattered. And I guess it's because when a dragon dies, like I don't know if their bodies are teleported or what. Because at some point we did have bones falling from the ceiling, but it was only once they took something, like Indiana Jones. So I don't understand how that all worked and why it took so long for us to find a full bone, but we did. Hudson found it, which is weird because he can only really see what Grace sees, but it's like he must be watching a movie of like what she sees in her mind, and he can look at other places that she's not looking. I don't fully understand the teamwork there. We barely make it out from there. Jaxon gets hit on the head to the point that he fully goes unconscious, and he's super weird about it. I know that that's not necessarily something you would expect as a nearly all-powerful vampire to get like knocked out by a dragon bone or whatever, but he's really weird about it, and this is a recurring theme of where he gets really upset that he's not able to protect people. Now, this is where I was kind of confused if we needed the Heartstone from the Unkillable Beast or if we were missing something else. Like, I don't know if I just zoned out during this part in the audiobook, but we don't have the stuff we need to do the spell to get Hudson out of Grace's mind. So the night before the Ludaris competition, they decide they're gonna go take on the Unkillable Beast. It's called Unkillable for a reason, friends. I could not, for the life of me, understand the thought process here. We're gonna take like 7 high school students and go face down this beast that they have been told nightmare stories about since they were children. And they go to face him down. And of course, Grace is like, I don't want to drag anybody else into this. Like, me and Jaxon will just go, or like, I can just go. And I'm like, you've been a gargoyle for 5 minutes. Please pull it together. Also, could we not have brought Grace's uncle? I feel like he could have helped here. But anyway, they show up and they start fighting this unkillable beast. So Grace starts hearing a voice in her head, which she thinks is her like inner gargoyle talking to her. In reality, it's the beast talking to her because he is also a gargoyle, a massive, giant, mountain-sized gargoyle. But I guess gargoyles can speak mind to mind. I don't think we really fully got that. He's saying pretty much that he doesn't want to hurt them and like to run, like get out before you get hurt and stuff like that. And I didn't really like this plot point, I guess, because Xavier dies. Macys is finally talking to this guy. She broke up with her horrible boyfriend, and she's finally talking to Xavier, who's just such a sweet person. And then he gets killed by the Unkillable Beast, and not 10 seconds later, Grace starts talking to the gargoyle, and she's like, oh my gosh, the Heartstone is his heart. Like, his heart is made of stone because he's a gargoyle or whatever. And for them to get the Heartstone, they would have had to kill him. Like, Flint's wing is broken. They're all battered and bruised. Xavier's dead. And within a couple seconds, there's this huge switch in the group where they're like, oh my gosh, this poor creature. Like, I can't believe we tried to kill this poor creature, which I can understand that sentiment. I can't necessarily understand it after he has killed your friend. Especially the way Macys, when Grace is trying to explain that he's a gargoyle and he's been trapped and it's not his fault that he's in there and that he's been basically like forced to protect whatever it is that's in his cave, as well as the Heartstone. But Macys immediately feels bad for this creature and starts shooting at his shackles. They can't get him off, by the way. But she's trying to help him get free. And I was like, this guy just like killed your almost boyfriend. And I did not understand it at all. There were times like that where I was like, I feel like everybody's mood just changed, or like people would let things go for the sake of just like, we don't want to deal with it anymore, let's move along with the plot. Every once in a while something like that would happen. Overall, like, whatever. They say they're gonna come back and free him, and then we like think about him again, but we never think about freeing him again. So I don't know if this is gonna come back up in Covet or not. I feel like it would have to. He's the only other gargoyle alive. And so they leave. Xavier's dead. Everyone's injured. And they didn't even get what they came for. And I know that Hudson was draining their mating bond or whatever, but is it not more draining to be up all night fighting against a beast that is literally called the Unkillable Beast, and then like sustaining multiple injuries? I didn't understand the thought process. I was like, go to bed. You got a big day tomorrow, kiddo. Like, go to sleep. And I was so frustrated that they spent all night doing this, only to come back to run into members of the Circle because they don't want Grace escaping. Like, Jackson's parents have put his personal dementors around Hogwarts. Like, that's what it felt like. So that she couldn't leave. So they then have to fight some of the members of this Circle. And so now they're down 2 fights. At this point, like, Grace has to be exhausted. Jaxon looks extremely exhausted. And this is partially because Hudson is pulling more from Jaxon than he is from Grace. Because he's clearly in love with Grace. Like, obviously. Jaxon is like on his last legs already. And then I could not believe it. So we go to fight. We have gotten back to school grounds with like an hour to spare. There's not even time for a nap. And we go to the Ludar's field. And Cole is there. This horrible werewolf child that Jaxon almost killed last year. Or not last year. I'm sorry, in the last book, which was like so soon ago. I know there was the 3-month span, but overall, the amount of time in these books was like 2 weeks. Cole shows up, and he has the spell that the Bloodletter gave to Jaxon to break the mating bond. Reminder, the only person who can be on your team heading into a Ludar's tournament when you're challenging for inclusion is your mate. Cole says the spell, mating bond is broken. This is unprecedented. Macys tells us later, like, no one has ever broken a mating bond. Like, the only way it can happen is death. And sometimes not even then. I feel like I should have seen this coming. I just didn't. But like, up until this point, Jaxon and Grace have been fighting like cats and dogs because Jaxon just wants to protect her all the time, and she's like, I can do my own thing, I can protect myself. And like, I get it to a certain extent, but at the same time I was like, do we really need to be having this conversation over and over again? I mean, on top of that, like, you do pile on that she's, you know, stuck with Hudson and always distracted by him because he's always talking to her, and she's, you know, starting to soften towards Hudson, and that makes a lot of people very worried. Still, I was just really frustrated by that. And then on top of that, their mating bond is broken, so now Jaxon can't even protect her if he wanted to. Somehow, Jaxon, one of the most powerful vampires of his generation, is completely drained of energy. Grace is fine. She recovers from losing the mating bond, and she just is like, okay, I guess I'm gonna go do this tournament by myself because I'm either gonna win there or die, and those are both better options than ending up in the possession of Jackson's parents. It's right at this point that we also find out that Hudson didn't kill all those vampires in cold blood. He was killing the army that his father was creating of people who were just so incredibly loyal to him. And I don't know if it was just vampires or if it was other people too. But there was this whole kind of undercurrent of like, why do paranormals have to hide from the humans? Like, it's ridiculous that we are so incredibly powerful and we have to always hide. And that was sort of like an idea that was lightly brushed aside, but Hudson saw that his dad was going to kill a lot of people to kind of get his message across and try and take over the world, I guess. That seemed to be the main goal for him. So now, like, we see this whole thing that Hudson did in a brand new light. Yes, he is so ridiculously powerful that nobody should be that powerful, but he was trying to do the right thing. And at this point, Grace is fully fully friends with him, and she also obviously has some feelings for him, but she's really not been paying attention to that because of Jaxon. And so she's like, if I die in this tournament, like, you're gonna be dead with me in my brain. So she does the spell, which that's why I was like, if we had the materials, why did we go to the Unkillable Beast? Like, why did we do that? If she had everything she needed to perform the spell, it made no sense. Was it because, like, we could kill Hudson without letting him out, or what? Like, I don't know if I didn't catch that. If you caught that, please let me know, because I was so frustrated. I was like, if we could have done this, then why didn't we just do it? But anyway, she performs the spell, and Hudson is now human in front of her. This was originally the goal, was to get Hudson out of her in human form and then just kill him, because he would be mortal. In this case, he could have taken his powers with him, but he left all of his power, all of it, with Grace, so that she can use it during the competition. Now, at this point, I fully believed that Hudson was going to come back in vampire form and be like, we're mates, I'm going into the competition with you, because if he has this really strong power of persuasion, who's to say that he couldn't go up to someone who no longer has a mate and say, we're mates, and that be persuasive enough to form a mating bond? But whatever, that's not what happened. Grace goes in alone. She also has Hudson's power in her body. She doesn't know how to access it. Let's just skip past the whole game. That was just like a mess, and it was very anxious to read. And she's fighting, I think 8 people. They were all students, but they're like Cole and 2 dragons and people who want her dead. I mean, better than, like, I guess the actual circle members, because I don't think she would have made it against them. And let's be real, she should not have made it against these other students. She's been a gargoyle for 5 minutes. She doesn't even know how to use half her powers. They have this ball that heats up that you have to pass it, or it gets so hot it's gonna burn you. And she keeps having to throw it up and go get it to kind of like reset the ball so it doesn't scorch her. But yeah, just I read somewhere, somebody said Grace is protected by main character syndrome TM, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's so true, because like no one else would have made it. Nobody can come in and help her, and everyone's just watching, waiting for her to die. And she's about to. Multiple times she almost dies, and then now we're at the point where we're like, this is it. Like, we see the black coming in at the edges of the vision. Like, she is not making it past this. And then she's finally able to access Hudson's power, and she realizes this is so much more than the power that Jaxon has. This is so much more than the power that anyone has. And she's like, if I snap my fingers, I could turn all these people to dust. So she uses his powers to win. Then Jaxon's dad comes, across the field and bites her in front of everyone. And that should tell you how much power this man has, because he is allowed to attack a student and expect no repercussions. We have learned in the past that there are different types of vampire bites, and Jaxon's dad has sort of, I guess, developed his own eternal bite or something. It's poisonous. Like, it's going to kill her. And then Hudson comes over and he starts having everybody dig a grave. I'm sorry. He starts having everybody dig a grave for her. And he's like, get in. What? You are not getting buried alive right now. Like, what is even happening? But he's like, just trust me, just trust me. It's like, okay. So she gets in and like lays down. And then all of her friends are like burying her. I'm sorry, this part was so funny. All of her friends are burying her alive. And it, like, to me, having read at least the paranormal stories that I've read so far, this to me sounds like they are burying her so that she can get herself back out as a newborn vampire. But that's not what happens here, because she starts to absorb the rocks into her body, which I'm like, okay, I guess that's like a thing that gargoyles could do. That's how she saves Meki, is that she tore a piece of her, like, rock off of herself and stopped the bleeding on his neck earlier. So I guess this is something similar where she can absorb more rock to heal herself or something. And so my understanding is that she maybe died for like a second, or she was almost dead, and then she starts to come back to life. And then she gets out of her grave, and now she's hugging Jaxon because she's like, oh my gosh, I'm alive. And they've decided they're just gonna continue dating without the mating bond. Like, I guess some people just don't even find their mates in this world, like, especially not this young. So they're just gonna continue dating. And then all of a sudden Hudson walks over, he's like, hey, get your hands off my mate. And I was like, yes. Now he knew this the second that he was out of Grace's mind and they were separate bodies. He immediately had the mating bond click into place. but she didn't know, or I guess she didn't have the experience to feel it. Like, I don't know exactly. But now they're mates, and I was like, this is excellent, because at this point I was fully Team Hudson. I do feel incredibly bad for Jaxon though. Like, that sucks. And I do like Jaxon. I think he's overprotective, but he means well. But I do like Hudson better, so that's exciting. And that's where we end the book. So what a wild ride. I think my favorite part was just all of the Hudson banter parts. I would love to know your favorite part, and I would also love to know if you understand the spell versus the Unkillable Beast thing, because like, why did we need the Unkillable Beast if she had the stuff to do the spell? But whatever. I've already started Covet, so I kind of have to stop myself from going into that one right now. Please like this video if you liked it. Click subscribe if you want to talk about more book stuff. My name's Katelyn. Thanks for watching. Bye.